The shooting of a cup. A few hours brought us to one of the stopping points, known by the name of Wooden Places. It was situated immediately above Latehart's Falls. The boat, obedient to the wheel of the pilot, made a graceful sweep towards the island above the chute, and, rounding to, approached the woodpile. As the boat drew near the shore, the escape steam reverberated through the forest and hills, like a chafed blowing of the caged tiger. The root of a tree, concealed beneath the water, prevented the boat from successfully getting close to the bank, and it became necessary to use one of the paddles to take a different position. "Back out, Manny! Try it again," called a voice from the shore. Throw your pole wide and brace off, or I'll run you against the snag." This was a kind of language long familiar to us in the Ohio. It was as simple as the slang of the keel boatsman. The speaker was immediately cheered by a dozen of voices from the deck, and I recognized him in the person of an old acquaintance, familiarly known to me from my boyhood. He was leaning carelessly against a large beech, and with his left arm negligently pressing a rifle to his side, presented a figure that Salvador would have chosen for his million as a model for his wild and gloomy pencil. His stature was upwards of 6 feet, his proportions perfectly symmetrical, and exhibiting the evidence of Herculean powers. To a stranger, he would have seemed a complete mulatto. Long exposure to the sun and weather on the lower Ohio and Mississippi had changed the color of skin, and for the fine European cast of his countenance, he might have passed for the principal warrior of some powerful tribe. Although at least 50 years of age, his hair was as black as the wing of a raven. Next to his skin, he wore a red flannel shirt covered by a blue capote, ornamented with white fringe. On his feet were moccasins and a broad leathern belt from which hung, suspended in a sheath, a large knife, circling his waist. As soon as the steamboat became stationary, the cabin passengers jumped on shore, and ascending the bank, the figure I have just described advanced to me to offer his hand. "How are you, Mike?" he said. "How goes it?" replied the boatsman, grasping my hand with a squeeze that I compared to nothing but that of a blacksmith's vice. "I'm good to see you, Manny," continued he in his abrupt manner. "I'm going to shoot at the tin cup for a quart, offhand, and you must be judge." I understood Mike at once, and on any other occasion should have remonstrated and prevented the daring trial of skill. But I was accompanied by a couple of English tourists who had scarcely ever been beyond the sound of bells, and were traveling posts over the United States to make up a book of observation of our manners and customs. There were also among the passengers a few bloods from Philadelphia and Baltimore, who would conceive of nothing equal to the Chestnut or Howard streets, and who expressed great disappointment at not being able to find terrapins or oysters at every village, marvelously lauding the comforts of Rubicons. My trampoline pride was roused, and I resolved to give him the opportunity of seeing a western land, for such Mike undoubtedly was, in all his glory. The philanthropist may start and accuse me of wanting humility. I deny the charge and refer to the apology to one of the best understood principles of human nature. Mike, followed by several of his crew, led the way to a beech grove, a little distance from the landing. I invited my fellow passengers to witness the scene. On arriving at the spot, a stout, bull-headed boatsman, dressed in a hunting shirt but barefooted, and whom I recognized as the younger brother of Mike, drew a line with his toe. Stepping off 30 yards, turned round, fronting his brother, and took a tin cup, which hung from his belt, and placed it on his head. Although I had seen this feat performed before I acknowledged, I felt uneasy, whilst the silent preparation was going on, but I had not much time for reflection. For this second, Albert exclaimed, "Blaze away, Mike, and let's have a quart." My companions de voyage, as soon as they recovered from the first effect of their astonishment, exhibited a disposition to interfere, but Mike, throwing back his left leg, leveled his rifle at the head of his brother. In the horizontal position, the weapon remained for some seconds as immovable as if the aim which held it was affected by no pulsation. "Evaluate your pace a little lower, Mike, or you will pay for the corn," cried the imperturbable brother. I know not if the advice was obeyed or not, but the sharp crack of the rifle immediately followed, and the cup flew 30 to 40 yards, rendered unfit for future service. There was a cry of admiration from strangers, who pressed forward to see if the foolhardy boatman was really safe. Your man is immovable, and if he had had the figure hewn out of stone, he had not even winked when the ball struck within a few inches of his skull. Mike has won, I exclaimed, and the decision was a signal which, according to their rules, permitted him to be the target to move his position. No more sensation was exhibited from the boatmen, more than a common wager had been won. The bet being decided, they hurried back to their boat, giving me and my friends an invitation to partake of the treat. We declined, but took leave of the thoughtless creatures. In a few minutes afterwards, we observed their keel wheeling into the current. A gigantic form of Mike bestriding a large steering oar, and the others arranging themselves in their places in the front of the cabin that extended nearly the whole length of the boat, covering merchandise of immense value as they stepped ashore, gave an Indian yell, and broke out into a sort of unconnected chorus, commencing with, "Hard upon the beach, or she moves too slow, all the way to Sheenytown, long while ago." Mike Fink, the Indian, and the Deer. At the early age of 17, Mike's character was displayed by enlisting himself in the Corps of Scouts, a body of irregular Rangers which was employed by the northwestern frontiers of Pennsylvania to watch the Indians and to give notice of any threatened inroad. At the time, Pittsburgh was on the extreme verge of white population, and the spies, who were constantly employed, generally extended their explorations 40 or 50 miles to the west of this post. They went out singly, lived as did the Indians, and in every respect became perfectly assimilated in habits, taste, and feeling with the red men of the desert. A kind of border warfare was kept up, and the scout thought it praiseworthy to bring the scalp of a Shawnee as the skin of a panther. He would remain in the woods for weeks longer, using parched corn for bread and depending on his rifle for his meat. He slept at night in perfect comfort, rolled in his blankets. In the Corps, whilst it was stifling, Mike acquired a reputation for boldness and cunning far beyond his companions. 1,000 legends illustrate the fearlessness of his character. There is one which he told himself with much pride, and which made an indelible impression upon my boyish memory. He had been out in the hills of Mahoning when, to use his words, he saw the signs of Indians being about. He had discovered the recent print of a moccasin on the grass, and found drops of the fresh blood of a deer on the lush green bush. He became cautious, sulked for some time in the deepest thickets for hazel and briar, and for several days did not discharge his rifle. He subsisted patiently on parched corn and jerk, which he had dried in his first coming to the woods. He gave no alarm to the settlements, because he discovered perfect certainty, and the enemy consisted of a small hunting party who were receding from the Alleghany. As he was creeping along one morning, with the stealthy tread of a cat, his eye fell upon a beautiful buck browsing on the edge of a barren spot 300 yards distant. The temptation was too strong for the woodsman, and he resolved to have a shot at every hazard. Repriming his gun and picking his flint, he made his approaches in the usual noiseless manner. At the moment he reached the spot from which he meant to take his aim, he observed a large savage intent on the same object, advancing from a direction a little different from his own. Mike shrunk behind a tree, and with quickness he thought, he, keeping his eyes fixed on the hunter, waited for the result with patience. In a few moments the Indian halted within 50 paces, leveled his piece at the deer, and in the meantime Mike presented his rifle at the body of the savage. And at the moment the smoke issued from the gun of the latter, the bullet of Fink passed through the red man's breast. He uttered a yell and fell dead at the same instant with the deer. Mike reloaded his rifle and remained in his covert for some minutes, uncertain to ascertain whether he had more enemies at hand. When he stepped up the prostrate savage, he satisfied himself that the life had been extinguished, turned his attention to the buck, and took from the carcass those pieces suited for the process of jerking. Mike teaches Peg a lesson. Mike, at one time, had a woman who passed for his wife. Whether she truly was so, we don't know. But at any rate, the following anecdote is a rare instance of that conjugal discipline. Some time in the later part of autumn, a few years after the close of the late war with Great Britain, several keel boats landed for the night near the mouth of the Muskogee, among which was that of Mike. After making all fast, Mike observed, just under the bank, a scalping of scraping into a heap of dried beech leaves which had been blown there during the day, having just fallen from the effects of the early autumn frosts. To all questions as to what he was doing, he returned no answer, but continued at his work until he had piled them up as high as his head. Then he separated them, making a sort of oblong ring, in which he laid down, as to ascertain whether it was a good bed or not. Getting up, he sauntered on board, hunted up his rifle, made preparations about his priming, and then got called in a very impressive manner upon his wife to follow him. Both proceeded up to the pile of leaves. Poor Peg was a terrible flutter as she had discovered that Mike was in no variable humor. "Get in and lie down," he commanded to Peg, topped off with one of Mike's very choicest oaths. "Now, Mr. Fink," she always mistered him when his blood was up, "what have I done? I don't know, I'm sure." "Get in there and lie down, or I'll shoot you," with another oath, and drawing up his rifle to his shoulder. Poor Peg obeyed and crawled into the leaf pile, and Mike covered her up with the combustibles. Then he took a flour barrel and split the stars into fine pieces and lighted them on the fire on board the boat, all the time watching the leaf pile and swearing he would shoot Peg if she moved. As soon as his splinters began to blaze, he took them into his hand, deliberately set fire in 4 different places to the leaves surrounding his wife. In an instant the whole mass was on fire, aided by a fresh wind which was blowing from the time, while Mike was quietly standing by enjoying the fun. Peg, though she, through fear of Mike, stood it as long as she could, but soon it became too hot and she made a run for the river, her hair and clothing all on fire. In a few seconds she reached the water and plunged in, rejoiced to know that she had escaped both the fire and the rifle so well. "There," said Mike, "that'll learn you not to be winking at them other fellers on the other boat."